Liam Gallagher has never been a man who looks back quietly, but when he talks about Oasis now, there is a weight in his voice that was never there before, a sense that time has finally slowed things down enough for him to see the full picture. Back then, everything moved too fast, fame hit too hard, and emotions were always louder than logic, so reflection was impossible because survival came first. Oasis was not just a band to Liam. It was a force of nature, something wild and uncontrollable that swept through their lives and left no room for calm thinking or careful choices. From the very beginning, Liam understood that Oasis was different, not because they tried to be, but because they simply were. They didn't come from music school manners or polite ambition. They came from grit, from working-class anger, from the need to be heard in a world that ignored people like them. Liam's voice carried that anger naturally, and when he stepped up to the microphone, it wasn't about singing perfectly, it was about delivering truth with attitude. That rawness connected with people instantly, but it also planted the seeds for conflict inside the band itself. Liam often reflects on how the early days felt like a shared dream that nobody fully understood. Success arrived so quickly that there was no time to learn how to handle it, and suddenly every decision felt massive, every argument felt personal, and every disagreement felt like betrayal. Oasis didn't grow slowly together, they exploded, and when something explodes, pieces are bound to clash. Liam admits now that none of them were emotionally prepared for what fame demanded, especially when it came to dealing with each other. The relationship between Liam and Noel was always complicated, even before Oasis became a global name. They were brothers first, bandmates second, and that order mattered more than people realized. Family history doesn't disappear when music starts. It follows you on stage, into studios, and into hotel rooms across the world. Liam says that many of their arguments were never really about music at all. They were about pride, old wounds, and the inability to step back and say enough is enough. As Oasis grew bigger, so did the pressure, and Liam remembers how every album, every tour, and every interview added another layer of tension. The world expected perfection, but Oasis was never built on perfection. It was built on attitude and belief. That mismatch created constant stress because the band was being judged by rules they never agreed to play by. Liam felt that pressure deeply, even if he didn't show it at the time, and instead of expressing it calmly, it often came out as confrontation. Infighting inside Oasis became part of the story, whether they liked it or not. Arguments weren't hidden. They were loud, public, and sometimes destructive. Liam now admits that he mistook intensity for strength and thought that backing down meant losing respect. At the time, fighting felt necessary, like defending territory, but looking back, he sees how many of those battles drained energy that could have gone into music instead. Band rivalries during the Britpop era only made things worse. Oasis was constantly compared to other bands, constantly ranked, constantly challenged, and Liam fed off that competition because it gave him purpose. He believed music should be a fight for relevance, not a polite exchange, and that belief shaped his attitude toward everyone around him. However, that same mindset also turned internal disagreements into wars, because if the outside world was an enemy, then any weakness inside the band felt dangerous. Liam reflects now on how ego ruled those years, not just his own, but everyone's. Success inflates confidence until it becomes something heavier, something that blinds people to consequences. When Oasis was at its peak, nobody wanted to be wrong, nobody wanted to apologize, and nobody wanted to admit fear. Liam says fear was always there, fear of losing relevance, fear of being overshadowed, fear of not living up to expectations, but instead of acknowledging it, they covered it with noise and aggression. One of the hardest things for Liam to accept in hindsight is how communication slowly broke down. At first, arguments were followed by laughter, but over time, silence replaced resolution. Issues stopped being discussed and started being stored, and stored resentment always finds a way to explode. Liam admits that many moments could have been handled differently if anyone had been willing to pause and listen, but Oasis never paused. They kept moving until something snapped. Despite all the chaos, Liam still remembers the magic clearly. He talks about standing on stage, hearing thousands of voices singing the same words, and feeling invincible in those moments. That connection with the audience was real and powerful, and it justified everything they were going through, or at least that's what it felt like back then. Those moments made the fight seem small in comparison, even when they weren't. Liam says that Oasis became larger than the people inside it, and once that happened, control was lost. The band turned into a symbol, something fans felt they owned emotionally, and that created expectations nobody could satisfy. Every argument between band members felt like a crack in something sacred, and the pressure to keep the image alive made honesty harder. Liam admits that pretending everything was fine often felt easier than admitting how broken things were becoming. As the years went on, the weight of constant conflict began to show. Creativity suffered, patience disappeared, and trust became fragile. Liam reflects on how success didn't solve problems, it magnified them, because money and fame don't fix personality clashes, they expose them. The band was running on momentum rather than harmony, and while momentum can carry you far, it eventually runs out. Liam doesn't deny his role in the infighting. He openly admits that he could be stubborn, confrontational, and unwilling to compromise. At the time, he believed that standing firm was part of his identity, and changing that felt like losing himself. Now with distance, he sees that identity doesn't have to be tied to constant resistance, and strength can exist without aggression. Looking back, Liam understands that Oasis was built on extremes. Extreme confidence, extreme rivalry, extreme loyalty, and extreme conflict. That intensity created unforgettable music, but it also created an environment where peace couldn't survive for long. He says that maybe Oasis was never meant to last forever in a traditional sense, because its power came from volatility, not balance. Liam reflects on the early warning signs that were ignored. Moments when stepping back could have saved relationships, but pride always stepped forward instead. Nobody wanted to be the first to soften, because softness felt dangerous in a band defined by edge. Liam now sees that vulnerability was misunderstood as weakness, when in reality, it might have been the only thing capable of holding them together. Despite everything, Liam speaks about Oasis with pride, not bitterness. He believes that the band represented something honest, something raw, and something deeply human. The fights, the rivalries, and the infighting were not separate from the music. They were woven into it. That honesty is why the songs still resonate, because people hear real emotion, not manufactured perfection. Liam acknowledges that time has changed his perspective, but hasn't erased his belief in what Oasis stood for. He still sees the band as a voice for people who felt overlooked and underestimated. That mission mattered more than comfort, and at the time, comfort was never the goal. Now he understands the cost of that mindset, but he doesn't disown it. As he reflects on those years, Liam doesn't search for villains or heroes. He sees a group of young men overwhelmed by success and driven by ambition they didn't fully understand. Oasis wasn't destroyed by one argument or one rivalry. It was worn down by years of unresolved tension and emotional distance. That realization doesn't bring regret as much as clarity. Liam says that legacy is not about being flawless. It's about being real, and Oasis was undeniably real. The infighting, the rivalries, and the chaos didn't cancel out the music. They contextualized it. Understanding that helps him make peace with the past, even if some wounds remain. When Liam thinks about Oasis now, he doesn't just hear the songs, he hears the arguments, the laughter, the exhaustion, and the belief that carried them through it all. He accepts that the band was a moment in time that cannot be recreated, only remembered and understood. And in that understanding, Liam Gallagher finally finds space to reflect without needing to fight. As the years passed and the noise around Oasis slowly faded, Liam Gallagher found himself standing in a quieter place, one where the chaos no longer screamed for attention and the past finally had room to breathe. Distance has a strange power. It doesn't erase memories, but it rearranges them, and Liam began to see moments he once ignored or misunderstood. The anger that once felt permanent started to soften into understanding, not forgiveness in the traditional sense, but awareness of how things reached the point they did. Life after Oasis forced Liam to face himself without the shield of the band. For the first time, he was no longer reacting to constant tension or competition inside a group that defined his every move. Standing alone made it impossible to blame circumstances or other people, and that clarity was uncomfortable at first. Liam admits that stepping out of the Oasis shadow made him realize how much of his identity had been built on resistance, rivalry, and proving something to the world. When he reflects on the breakup now, Liam no longer sees it as a sudden explosion, but as the final crack in something that had been under pressure for years. The arguments that ended Oasis were not new. They were familiar, just louder and more final. He understands that by the time the band ended, too much damage had already been done emotionally for any quick repair. Sometimes endings are not failures. They are conclusions that arrive when nothing else can move forward. Liam speaks about Noel with more balance now, acknowledging that their relationship was shaped by more than music. Brotherhood adds a layer of expectation that bandmates don't share, and disappointment cuts deeper when it comes from family. Liam admits that both of them carry the weight of unspoken expectations, each believing the other should understand without words. That silent demand became one of the most destructive forces between them. Rivalries outside Oasis no longer hold the same importance for Liam. What once felt like life or death competition now feels like background noise from another era. He recognizes that rivalry fueled ambition but also stole peace, turning music into a constant contest instead of a shared expression. Liam believes now that true confidence doesn't need constant comparison, a realization that only came after years of separation from the battlefield mindset. As a solo artist, Liam discovered a different rhythm, one where control came with responsibility rather than conflict. Making decisions alone meant owning both success and failure, and that ownership brought a new kind of discipline. He learned that freedom doesn't come from fighting everyone around you. It comes from knowing who you are without needing validation. That lesson reshaped how he viewed his past behavior and the choices he once defended fiercely. Liam often reflects on how fans continued to keep Oasis alive, sometimes more intensely than the band members themselves ever did. He finds it powerful that people still argue, debate, and feel deeply about music created decades ago. That emotional connection reminds him that whatever went wrong internally did not erase what went right artistically. The songs survive the fights, and that survival gives meaning to the struggle. Time has also changed how Liam understands legacy. In the past, legacy meant dominance, chart positions, and cultural impact measured in headlines. Now he sees legacy as endurance, the ability of music to remain relevant without needing constant promotion or explanation. Oasis songs still speak to people discovering them for the first time, and that timelessness feels more important than any award or rivalry ever did. Liam admits that maturity didn't arrive suddenly. It came through loss, distance, and moments of isolation. Watching life move on without Oasis was painful, but was also necessary. Pain forced reflection, and reflection led to growth, even if it arrived later than it should have. He no longer romanticizes the chaos, even though he accepts it as part of the journey. When asked about a reunion, Liam's thoughts are layered rather than reactive. He doesn't reject the idea out of bitterness, nor does he chase it out of nostalgia. He believes that music should come from honesty, not obligation, and any return would need to feel natural rather than forced by expectation. For Liam, preserving the truth of Oasis matters more than rewriting its ending. Liam reflects on how silence between brothers can last longer than arguments. Words can be sharp, but silence can be absolute, and that absolute distance reshapes relationships permanently. He understands now that some things cannot be fixed by shouting louder. They require patience and vulnerability, qualities he didn't value enough in the past. Accepting that reality doesn't weaken him. It strengthens his understanding of what was missing. He also speaks openly about regret, but not in the way people expect. Liam doesn't regret standing his ground or believing in himself. He regrets moments when pride blocked empathy. He recognizes that winning arguments often cost in connection, and those losses were invisible at the time. That awareness doesn't haunt him, but it stays with him as a reminder of how easily things can slip away. Looking back, Liam sees Oasis as a mirror of youth, intense, fearless, and reckless. Youth believes time is endless and consequences are distant, and that belief shaped every decision the band made. With age, that illusion disappears, replaced by a clearer understanding of fragility. Liam accepts that Oasis could only exist in that youthful state, and trying to preserve it forever would have been dishonest. Liam's relationship with Rivalry has transformed into respect for individuality. He no longer needs to compete to feel relevant, because relevance now comes from authenticity. He understands that music scenes evolve, and that each generation finds its own voice. Oasis played its role, and that role doesn't need to be defended aggressively anymore. He often says that the greatest lesson Oasis taught him was resilience. Surviving fame, criticism, and public collapse forces a person to rebuild from the inside. Liam rebuilt himself piece by piece, learning when to fight and when to let go. That balance was missing before, and its absence defined much of the band's internal chaos. Liam acknowledges that the public often sees only extremes, the fights, the insults, and the headlines. What they don't see are the quiet moments of doubt and exhaustion that followed those extremes. He admits there were times when he felt trapped by the image he helped create, unable to step outside it without feeling exposed. Breaking away allowed him to breathe again. As he reflects on the long shadow of Oasis, Liam doesn't feel trapped by it anymore. He sees it as a foundation rather than a cage, something that shaped him but doesn't define every step forward. That shift in perspective allowed him to embrace his solo career without feeling like he was competing with his past. Acceptance replaced resistance, and that changed everything. Liam understands now that not all stories need happy endings to be meaningful. Some stories are powerful because they end honestly, without pretending everything can be fixed. Oasis ended as it lived, intense and unresolved, and that truth is part of why it still resonates. Pretending otherwise would diminish its impact. He believes that people connect to Oasis because they hear real human conflict in the music. The tension wasn't hidden, it was felt, and that made the songs alive. Perfect harmony might have produced smoother relationships, but it might have erased the raw energy that defined the band. Liam accepts that contradiction without trying to solve it. As time continues to move forward, Liam carries the past with him without letting it control him. He doesn't rewrite history, and he doesn't apologize for being who he was, but he also doesn't deny growth. Growth, for him, means understanding without erasing, remembering without reliving. That balance allows him to speak about Oasis with honesty rather than defensiveness. In the end, Liam Gallagher sees Oasis not as a broken dream, but as a completed chapter that changed everything that came after. The infighting, the rivalries, and the brotherhood all shaped a legacy that refuses to fade. He stands by the music, accepts the damage, and respects the journey for what it was. And in that acceptance, Liam finds peace not by forgetting the past, but by finally understanding it.